Today, I talk with senior travel writer Sky Ariella about why Portugal should be on everyone's travel radar. And the reasons go on and on. There's incredible food, fairy tale towns, the most beautiful beaches you'll ever see, legendary surfing, and so much more. And as one of the oldest countries in Europe, Portugal blends historic castles with vibrant culture and world class wine and cuisine. Truly, of the 16 European countries I've visited, Portugal easily makes my top three. Sky covers the best of Portugal, including places to stay, things to do, foods to try, and some unexpected hidden gems she discovered during her time living in Porto. So don't go anywhere. Here's a 30-second teaser of the episode.
Portugal in general is really going to be a haven for budget travelers. And this beach is actually famous around the world for surfers. It is where the largest wave in history was ever successfully surfed.
The beach I went to in Sintra, it was probably the prettiest beach I've ever been to. Nobody was there. It was like our own little hidden paradise.
Portugal is actually ranked as the fifth safest country in Europe and the seventh safest country in the entire world. Portuguese food in itself is so delicious. There's so many. You could just spend your entire vacation trying Portuguese staples.
Hello and welcome to the Travel Lemming podcast. I'm your host, Betty Hurd. I'm a senior travel writer and podcaster here at Travel Lemming, as well as a full-time flight attendant based in Los Angeles, California. On the show, we interview the experts about the most incredible travel destinations around the world so that you, our listeners, can start planning your own adventure to these amazing spots. My guest today is currently on the other side of the world from me. She's also a senior travel writer here at Travel Lemming, who's written dozens of guides for massive destinations around Europe, Asia, and New York. You'll recognize her if you listen to our episode on solo traveling as a female. Before I introduce her, hit pause, like and subscribe to our channel, and give us a 5-star rating. Your interaction with the podcast goes a long way, and we really appreciate our listeners taking the time to do that. Now, welcome back to the show, Sky Ariella.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Betty. I'm so excited to be on the podcast again.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sky is one of the most well-traveled people I've ever talked to. So you're always such a wonderful guest. You were also a guest host for the New York episode. That was awesome. So I'm really excited to get to discuss a place with you that you know so well, and also one of my favorite destinations in Europe.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites too. I was so excited that we're going to get to chat about Portugal because it really is such an amazing place. And I think since it's so close to so many famous European countries, it kind of gets lost under the radar a little bit, but it's starting to make a name for itself now. And more people are heading to Portugal. So I think it's the perfect time for us to do this episode.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to get into all those reasons in just a moment. So, Sky has written over 100 guides on travel lemming, nearly 20 of which are Portugal focused. So, give those a look after the show on our website, travellemming.com. So, Sky, tell us what makes you our Portugal expert?
Well, I took my first trip to Portugal back in 2022. Then I was doing it a little bit more like a tourist. I went to Lisbon originally, and then I did a little bit of the south, a little bit of central Portugal, hitting Sintra, Setúbal, Nazaré, Faro, Evora, and Coimbra. So this gave me a really great taste of the country as a visitor and someone who had absolutely no experience. It was actually also the first European country that I had ever visited. So it was a really special destination for me. So that was back in 2022. And then this year in 2025, I went back and I actually spent a month and a half living in just Porto up in the north. And that gave me a lot more insight into what it's like in the local life in Portugal and what it's like to not necessarily just be a visitor, but really get in tune with the flow of how things go on a day to day basis. And I definitely think that Porto became my favorite destination within the country. So looking forward to discussing that more.
That's so awesome. I love that you were able to get more of a local perspective living there more long term this year. Porto's one of my absolute favorite places in the entire world. I haven't been to that many places in Portugal, but of all of them, Porto just blew my mind. So I'm so jealous that you got to live there. That is so awesome.
Yeah, it is such a special city. Definitely highly recommend it for anyone who's interested in visiting Portugal in general.
For sure. So, with so many desirable destinations in Europe, why should people choose to travel to Portugal?
There's so many reasons. I think one of the biggest is a lot of countries in Europe, it can be very difficult to get around and see all the major hubs in one trip. But since Portugal is a rather compact country, you can really see so much of it, even if you only have a week or two to be there. I mean, from Porto to Lisbon, it's really only a 3 hour train journey. So you can get from the top to the bottom and see it all in a really short amount of time. And the other thing that I think is really amazing is that even though it's small, every portion of the country is very different. So Lisbon is going to be a completely different vibe than the Algarve region, and Porto and Braga are going to be completely different from central Portugal. So there's a lot of different experiences there, whether you're looking for surfing or relaxing on the beach, maybe partying, drinking port wine, going to see the Douro Valley wine region. There's just so many things. So I think it could really appeal to any type of traveler.
Yeah, definitely a little something for everyone. And you mentioned the Douro Valley wine region, right? We actually had a little snippet about that in our podcast about the 50 best places to travel in 2025. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
so gorgeous there. If you've never been to a wine region, even if you're not a big wine drinker, if you like nature and landscapes, it is ethereal out there. You will absolutely love it.
If you could paint a picture of Portugal so that listeners can understand how the country is laid out.
For sure. So Portugal is a pretty small country. It's on Europe's westernmost coast, and it's really easy to get around using the public transportation. So most people are going to fly into Lisbon. This is like the most famous city in Portugal. Very easy to get to as an American as well. From there, you stick around for a bit. Definitely recommend a couple days there. But most people will then head south, and that's where the Algarve region is. So many amazing beaches and like just really gorgeous nature in general that I think Portugal has become quite famous for. If you move up the coast north a little bit, there's other surfing towns like Peniche and Nazaré, which is one of my favorite beach towns ever. And then even more centrally, you have Aveiro, and then you'll eventually reach Porto and Braga. There are some more destinations, more inland a little bit, but I think that most people will make their way up the coast because it's really the major cities are along that way. And it is like the easiest way to travel. And then further up north, as we mentioned before, there's also the Douro Valley. That's like right at the top, right in the like northernmost region of Portugal. There's so many historical cities there as well. Like Avora is a really good one. That one's known for the Chapel of Bones, if anyone's ever heard of it, which is church completely made out of bones. So all in all, I would say if you're looking for more cultural experience, you're going to want to go north. And if you're looking for more of a beachy experience, you're going to want to go south.
Love that. Thank you so much for kind of laying that out for all of us. So, where should somebody travel in Portugal for their very first visit to the country?
So, if you're a first time visitor to Portugal, I think the most obvious answer is that you have to go to Lisbon. It's the capital city of the country, and there really are a lot of interesting things to do there. You have historical attractions like Belém Tower and Jeronimo's Monastery, so you have the history there. But there's also plenty of fun activities and a really big nightlife scene on Pink Street, and even LX Factory is more of a laid back partying atmosphere. And there's also really great food around Lisbon. You could find it if you're in the mood for a more market scene or you're traveling in a group of people. Time Out Market has so many options. And then there's places that are better for trying local Portuguese food and seafood, like Riva Haria Ramiro. And then, of course, there's Pastel de Nata. I think the best one in Lisbon is at Pastéis de Belém. So you can really get a good taste of Portugal and everything it has to offer in Lisbon. With that being said, I don't think that Lisbon is the only place that you should go, but for first-time travelers, it's definitely should be the first stop.
Very good point, and I'm excited to talk more about food like you just mentioned a little bit later in the episode. Yeah, Lisbon is where I flew in for my first visit to Portugal, and I met up with some friends, we stayed at a hostel, and we had such a great time there. Like you said, I don't think it was my absolute favorite place, it wasn't like I said, Porto was, but for the first time, it was so nice to just, like, get my bearings in this great big city that had so much to offer. I remember getting such a good leg workout because man, those streets are so steep.
It is very hilly.
Yeah.
That is something to keep in mind to bring definitely comfortable shoes because you're going to be walking up a lot of hills of Lisbon.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I was like, I had no idea Lisbon was so hilly like this, but it's so gorgeous. So yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that, and where do you think budget travelers should stay in Portugal?
So I think Portugal in general is really going to be a haven for budget travelers because the country in general, especially for Americans, it can feel very affordable. Granted, I don't think you should go around saying, oh my God, this is so cheap, because that's kind of a
Right.
taboo vibe, but it can definitely feel that way, especially coming from somewhere very expensive like the United States. If you're looking for the most affordable part of the country, I would avoid the Lisbon and Algarve region because that is a very vacation heavy area, which tends to inflate the prices. farther north and more inland is where you're going to find the cheapest areas. So all the way in the north in Braga, I think that's probably one of the cheapest cities to stay in. And even Porto can be very affordable. And then there's places like Evora, and in the shoulder season, Nazaré can actually be really affordable as well. So anytime that's not going to be the height of summer, usually around May or September, you can find really good prices in that area.
And are there any other notable places that you'd like to touch on in Portugal?
We already touched on it a little bit, but I think that my biggest recommendation is definitely Porto. I think for travelers, this city just has it all. It's super walkable. It's actually been ranked a lot of times as one of the most walkable cities in Europe. There's so much amazing food there. I think it is such a hidden gem for foodies. It's close to day trips like the Douro Valley or even Braga. You could even make your way back south from Porto and do day trips like that. And like I touched on a little bit, it can be a little more affordable than places in the South. And it's filled with history, culture, and just like really, I think everything travelers want when they're visiting a new country. So definitely Porto should be on your radar.
Yeah, Porto has such a special vibe. I love how the river that runs right through the city, you can just walk along that little promenade along the water, and there's so many awesome stores and restaurants. The people are so nice. I went to a vineyard for wine tasting. It was wine from the Douro Valley, and it was some of the best wine I've ever had. Such an awesome place. I absolutely love Porto.
Yeah, it's an amazing city.
And also, a lot of airlines do fly into Porto from the East Coast of the United States. So it's not necessarily a place where you have to get to Lisbon or another major destination in Europe and then take like a hopper flight there. They have a pretty sizable airport, and you can also take a lot of great budget airlines to other European destinations from Porto, because that's what I did. I took maybe like a $40 flight from Porto to Barcelona after I left there, and yeah, that was really awesome how accessible it was.
Yeah, that's so true. I also flew into Porto from London, and then I flew back from Porto to Newark. So very easy to get around and also very accessible to other European destinations.
So when is the best time of year to visit Portugal?
So, because Portugal has become quite a popular destination in recent years, I'd suggest avoiding the peak season that's going to be around the summer from June through August. A, because it can get very, very hot around this time of year, which isn't necessarily the worst thing, but it can kind of drain you. But the bigger issue is that the whole country is going to be much busier with tourists around this time, especially if you're planning on going to the beaches. It can get a little overwhelming during this season because beaches are packed. They're packed with so many people wanting to enjoy the good weather and the prime beach time. But if you still want to enjoy the great weather, but maybe with less crowds, I definitely recommend going during this shouldered season. So in Portugal, that's going to be around late April through May, or if you want to do in the fall, September to like the beginning of October. When I was living in Porto, I was there through April until mid-May, and it was a really beautiful time to be there. It did have a couple rainy days, but overall, I do think that it's worth it for the fewer crowds. And as long as you bring an umbrella for an occasional shower, it really works out well.
All right, so avoid the summer, better weather, less crowds. Got it.
Yes.
All right, so what are some of the best things to do in Portugal?
So, first and foremost, I think Portugal is a food destination. I don't necessarily think that's the first thing that comes up when a lot of people are searching Portugal. First, you'll probably see the beaches, maybe the history, but really, Portugal has amazing food, especially like the local dishes. Portuguese food in itself is so delicious. There's so many, you could just spend your entire vacation trying Portuguese staples and you'll be full the entire time. A few of them that I would start with are, of course, the port wine, pastel de nata. If anyone knows what that is, that's going to be like a little dessert pastry that is just so delicious and really cheap. They're usually around €1 or less, and you can find those anywhere throughout the whole country. Bacalhau is a cod fish that you'll also find in a lot of places, but it's very, very popular in Porto. They make it a lot of different ways. You'll find like codfish fritters or just the fish itself, but you definitely have to try bacalhau. A tinned fish, that's more of like a souvenir, I would say, but that's like hugely popular in Portugal. I think for Americans, that can be a bit of a shock because they don't really see tinned fish as a luxurious good, but in Portugal, it really is. And it's so delicious. And it's a great thing to bring home if you want a little piece of Portugal with you. The French is cena, which is kind of like a very heavy meat sandwich. And it seems like it's going to be a lot, but it really does just hit the spot, especially if you spent the night before drinking or anything like that. This is a go to the next day for lunch called the verde. That's a soup, a green soup. It's really good. And one of my favorite things, this is a must. I got this in Porto and I saw it only in Porto, but I think it does exist throughout the rest of the country, is called a cachorrino. It's a Portuguese hot dog is basically what they say. And it's a sandwich with little pieces of pork cut up and cheese, and it's cut up into these tiny little pieces. It is not something that I would usually be interested in, but it's amazing. It's so delicious. I got it so many times when I was in Porto. So if you're in Porto and you want to try a cacciarino, the best place by far to get one is this spot called Gazella. And they actually apparently invented the dish. So it's literally straight from the source. This is a really local restaurant. When you go in, it'll be all local Portuguese people coming to get their lunch, but they are, I think, used to by this point tourists coming in to try the famous sandwich. They're so friendly, and it's just a really amazing experience if you want to try the local food.
I love that, and that's the best part about traveling to me is trying something that you wouldn't normally ever think that you would like and then finding that it's delicious, so that sounds really interesting, and I would love to go back and try all of these foods that you've mentioned.
Yeah, and so you have to. The only downside of trying foods when you're traveling is that sometimes you get a hankering for it, and then you're halfway around the world and you can't get it anymore.
That is so true, I know, it's always a tragic moment.
So beyond the food, the next most iconic thing in Portugal, I think, is the beaches. There really are so many gorgeous beaches. The Algarve is probably the most famous place for beaches, but the truth is you could find them all over the country. Even in Porto, I was finding amazing beaches, oftentimes very unpopulated, all over the place. So you will be able to find beaches wherever you go. And I definitely highly recommend taking at least a day or two of your itinerary and hanging out on the beach and appreciating the amazing situation of where Portugal is, especially if you don't want to spend all day there, try to catch a sunset because Portugal is located on the westernmost coast of Europe. I think it has some of the best sunsets, maybe in the whole continent. They really are just so gorgeous. And there's a lot of viewpoints because the sunsets are so iconic, people really take advantage of it. And this is a free activity. If you're in Porto, a couple of places that I always went for the sunsets were Jardim de Moro, but that one is very, very popular. There will be 1,000 people there. If you enjoy that vibe, there's live music and people hanging out. So it can be fun, but it is busy. If you want somewhere where there's going to be no people, I really loved Praia de Lavadores. That's in like the Gaia area of Porto. So you'll be able to find areas for whatever energy you're looking for, but definitely catch a sunset or two.
Love that, and when you mentioned the beaches, I will say the beach I went to in Sintra, Portugal, we took a bus from Lisbon to Sintra because everyone kept saying, "Go see the castles in Sintra." And we didn't wanna pay for a tour. This was at a time where I had, like, no money. So instead, we just kind of wandered around Sintra. We found this trail to this beach. We had to hike way, way down this mountain. It was probably the prettiest beach I've ever been to in my entire life. It had these, like, cathedral-shaped rocks. Nobody was there. The water was crazy, it was really strong, but just, like, the most stunning beach location of my life. My friends and I were there all day, and I couldn't believe that nobody was there. It was like our own little hidden paradise, but it wasn't really hidden, people just weren't going to the beach, so, my god, I still think about that.
Every single place in Portugal, you will find a beach. They're around.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are those types of beaches where you kind of go down into like a little cove and then you're surrounded by these incredible like rocky landscapes. So I think that's one of the reasons why they've become so famous because it's not just a beach. Like you're surrounded by the natural landscape and it gives a lot more of an ambiance to it.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, it feels like a fairy tale or something like that. It's so
Yes.
cool. But what are some other things to do in Portugal?
Definitely, there's a lot of history in Portugal. As you mentioned, the country is one of the oldest, and there's so many historic sites to see. I mentioned in Lisbon, the Bellum Tower is usually one of the first places people go, but there is just endless historic sites there. In Porto, the Porto Cathedral is gorgeous. I mean, I've been to a lot of cathedrals, and at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, every city's got a cathedral, but this one is really something special. They're like, it's like they have the blue tile work that Portugal is known for all over. It's a really great place to get pictures if you're into that. It's just beautiful. If you're also looking to find other spots that have like the blue tile work that Porto is known for, there's a spot called the Chapel of Souls. This is probably one of the most popular places to get pictures of yourself in Porto, but it also happens to be a historic attraction. Or Sao Bento Station is another great option. And the Sao Bento Station and the Chapel of Souls are both free to check out. So those are great for budget travelers. If you're not so much into churches, there's a lot of other options as well. Like one good option is Livraria Lelo. This is a 144-year-old bookstore that actually is said to have inspired the Harry Potter moving stairs in Hogwarts because they have this massive staircase in the middle of the bookstore that is really, really gorgeous, have to admit. But if you're going to go there, definitely try and go early because it gets very busy. So, historic attractions, there are so many. The other thing that I think is really good about Portugal is because it's a smaller country, you can stay in one place like Lisbon or Porto, and you have access to so many day trips. I know you mentioned Sintra, that I think is one of the best day trips from Lisbon. And then the Douro Valley, I think, is an amazing day trip from Porto. And also Braga, you could do as a day trip from Porto. But really, because the country is so compact, especially if you're willing to rent a car, anything can really be a day trip. I mean, like, technically, if you really have the motivation, you could go from the top of the country all the way to the bottom of the country and then drive back. It will be like a 4-hour drive each way, but technically it is possible. So the day trips, I think, really make it a fun location. You don't get stuck in one city.
Yeah, no, I love how it's so much more manageable when you go to a smaller destination. Because sometimes when you go to such a big country, you just feel like, "Oh my god, there's so much I still haven't seen," when you leave.
Yeah.
And with Portugal, obviously, there's you could still spend a lifetime of exploring the whole country even though it is smaller. But I love how it feels like you can really hit a bunch of destinations within one trip, and they're all very different and very exciting.
Yeah, it is really manageable. And I think that is one of the reasons that it's such a good vacation destination specifically. Because, like you were saying, like, even if you stay in Barcelona, you really can only check out the places in that region. It's too big a space to be like going all the way to Madrid or going all the way to Sevilla. It's just too much, but you
Right.
don't really have that issue as much in Portugal. Another thing that I think is really special is that there's so many ways to appreciate the Portuguese culture while you're there. It's not just tourist attractions. I think that a lot of places you go there, you look up the things to do, and it'll be like, go to this museum, go to this historic site. And that's really all there is to it. But you can really get into the Portuguese culture while you're visiting. One way that I think that every visitor should do that is by catching a Fado performance. This is a style of Portuguese music where there's guitars and singing. And the way that it was described to me by the performers is that they're kind of doing like like a singing poetry, if that makes sense. So even if you don't speak Portuguese, you could like really feel the passion in these performers.
Disse que eu tinha na boca gosto a saudade cabelos.
My first time in Portugal, I actually didn't catch one of these shows because I thought, it's singing and like singing and guitar playing, and there's not much more to it. But I did end up going to one with dinner when I was living in Porto, and I was so ashamed of myself that I didn't go the first time because it really is a must. It is not just singing and guitars; it is really special, and it gives you a really beautiful insight into the passion of the culture. If you're in Porto, highly recommend going to Fado Portuguese in the Gaia neighborhood. That's where I went. You don't actually have to pay for the show. You just get dinner and the show comes with dinner. It is so much fun. And by the end of the night, everyone is like singing along with them. It's just a blast.
Vai comigo.
I love that so much. I don't think I ever caught any fado when I was in Portugal. I actually when I was doing a little bit of research for this episode, I was like, "I don't think I've heard of that." So I must have just been totally blind to it when I was there, because 'cause I'm sure there was fado playing at some point when I was there, but that sounds so incredible. I feel like music is one of the best ways to connect with the culture, so I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone should definitely check out a Fado performance. And it's easy to find throughout the whole country. I went in Porto, but you could definitely find places in Lisbon or even the Algarve, wherever you are. Just do a quick search and you'll find it.
So we've touched on beaches a little bit, and I know Portugal is one of the biggest surfing destinations in the entire world. So, could you talk a little bit more about some of those famous beaches in different parts of Portugal?
For sure. So, depending on what region you're in, you're kind of going to experience a different type of beach. If you want those magical beaches that we were talking about with the crazy landscapes and the rocky shorelines, you're going to want to go to the Algarve. There's a few famous ones. Probably the most famous is Praia da Marinha. This one is really well known for that type of landscape where you're just surrounded by giant cliffs and you feel like a tiny little pebble on the beach. Another good one in that region is Praia de Dona Ana, and that is going to be a similar vibe where you have to walk down to get to a little cove style beach, but you're really rewarded with the gorgeous landscapes. And really, in the Algarve, the whole thing is beaches. So while those are two of the most famous, no matter where you are in this region, if you pull up your Google Maps, you're probably not going to be more than a 10 to 20-minute walk to slash drive away from a beach. Those can tend to be very crowded. So if you don't want a crowded beach, I would suggest trying to find, kind of like you mentioned in Sintra, just like a random seashore, because it will probably still be one of the most gorgeous you've ever seen, just with fewer people. I mentioned earlier that even in Porto, which isn't necessarily known as a beach destination, there are still lots of beaches around. A couple of my favorites for sunset, I mentioned Praia de Lavadores. That one is in the Gaia neighborhood. There is literally nobody really on the shores, or at least when I went there, there was like a few fishermen, a few people watching the sunset, but really not like a tourist heavy destination. And there's restaurants lining the beach. So after you watch the sunset or you hang out a bit, just read a book on the shores, you could find a really, really delicious seafood meal around here. Another great beach in Porto is Praia de Gondarem. This is in the Foz do Douro neighborhood, so it's going to be about a 15-minute drive outside of the city center. And this is just along this whole area is just beaches, beaches, beaches. So if you want to stay near a beach in Porto, that's the place to go. In this area, there's also a site called Pergola de Nevoglide, and this is a really pretty place for pictures. I think that everyone, if you're looking for a spot that's not as overrun with people like the Chapel of Souls in Porto, that's going to be a really, really pretty place to get pictures. I mean, honestly, it's so gorgeous that it could even be worthy of like engagement photos level. So those are a couple of my favorites in Porto. It's really pretty. And it's also, I mean, obviously a free attraction. So mine as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's like it's so special when you can go to a place like that and feel like you have it to yourself. Because I feel like so often when you travel, everybody's already discovered the spot, and you go there and it's just overrun with people and it just kind of takes away from it. So I love that about Portugal. It seems like there's so many awesome places where you can go and just it's just you.
Yeah, there are like a lot of undiscovered gems around Portugal, I think. I think because it's just, I mean, not just starting to become a destination, but it's really in recent years taken off as a destination. Not every little
Mhm.
corner has been completely mapped out by tourists yet. And there are just a lot of these little gems that you can find when you're just wandering around. Also, I mentioned earlier just a little bit, one of my favorite beach destinations, not just in Portugal, but in the world probably, is this town called Nazaré. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hours from Lisbon, if I remember correctly. And really, the main thing here is the beaches. This is one of those towns where you're really not going to find much else to do besides the beach and eating great food, which for me, when I went there, was exactly what I was looking for. So, on the one side of town, you have Nazaré Beach. This is kind of like a more family friendly beach. The waves are a little bit calmer, depending on the season, but in the summer and the shoulder season, you could definitely get in the water and it's comfortable. It's sandy. You can like lay a towel out and just chill out. And it really is just beautiful and it runs along the city. So you can basically get there from any accommodation. And then on the other side of Nazaré, there's a beach called North Beach or Praia do Norte. And this beach is actually famous around the world for surfers. It is where the largest wave in history was ever successfully surfed. Now, this beach isn't necessarily where you're going to want to chill out, but it is really amazing if you're there during the big wave season in the winter because the waves are just incredible. Like you really witness the pure raw power of the ocean when you go during that season. Even in the off season, though, this side of Nazaré has a little bit more rougher waves. Probably wouldn't recommend getting in the water with kids, but it is really pretty. And surfers definitely want to check it out.
Oh, yeah. I've seen a photo of Nazare with those mountain-sized waves. I thought it was a fake photo. I thought it was AI. Like, I have never seen anything like it in my life. It's actually kind of terrifying when you see the pictures of those waves because 'cause they're just massive. I've never seen anything like it, so I feel like if you're an experienced surfer, I'm sure that's like a top 3 destination around the world for surfing.
Yes, definitely. But keyword being experienced. I don't think this is the place you want to get
Yeah.
in the water with a surfboard for the first time. But with that being said, Nazare can be a good place to learn how to surf, just Nazare Beach instead of Praia de Norte. And there's also lots of other areas around Portugal where you can learn how to surf. I've heard that Peniche can be a really great place to learn the skill. And there's lots of surf schools around because it is such a popular thing to do in the country. So if you've ever wanted to try it, that could be a really fun thing to do during your trip to Portugal.
Love that. So you've already kind of touched on this and how it's a smaller country, so it's easier to navigate. But I want to ask you, what are the best ways to get around Portugal?
So if you're only sticking within one city, so let's say if you're staying in Lisbon, you're only going to stay in Lisbon. If you're staying in Porto and you're only going to stay in Porto, these cities are extremely walkable. Even like the little towns, you could get around completely on foot and never need a taxi as long as you have a comfortable pair of shoes with you and you're willing to put in the miles. So I think that on foot, if you're not going long distances, is like the best way to go. If you are going between cities, you can take the train, or there's also a really good bus system throughout the country. So this is going to take you literally anywhere throughout the whole country, whether you need to get from the south to north or even inland, you will be able to find a train or a bus to take you there. I would suggest using the app Rome to Rio or Omeo to look for train tickets and schedules and just like see how you're going to make that journey happen. Even Google Maps you can use and they'll help you out and you can figure out the trains and the buses that you need to take. So that's how I would do it if you're looking to get between cities. If you're within a city and is somewhere like Lisbon or Porto where it is possible to be on the complete opposite end of where you need to be, or maybe it's like an hour or so walk and you just don't have fit in you anymore, you can still definitely find ride shares around Portugal. They have Uber, but that's usually not the cheapest option. I would go for Bolt or Free Now, but just because those are a little bit more local and they tend to be a little cheaper. Also, if you do not want to take a ride share and you don't want to walk, you can rely on public transportation when you're within a major city. So Lisbon, Porto, even like the Algarve region, you will be able to find local metros and local buses, but it's just a matter of navigating it. But that could definitely be the cheapest way to go if you have to go a slightly longer distance.
Gotcha. And I'm sure all of these are fairly affordable fares, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, even if you're taking ride shares in comparison to probably what you're used to in the United States, they are very, very reasonable. Even to the airport, when I was going from Porto, I scheduled it in advance. I think it was less than 20 euros to go from my accommodation to the airport, and it was like a 35-minute drive. So not too bad.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that would be like $80 in the
Yeah, I
US,
know.
I feel like.
Literally.
That's so nice. So we're kind of coming to the end of the episode, and I want to touch on safety. So would you say that Portugal is safe? And is there anything in particular that visitors should look out for when they visit?
Portugal is actually ranked as the fifth safest country in Europe and the seventh safest country in the entire world. So, statistically,
Wow.
it is an extremely, extremely safe place. That should give it a lot of credit on its own. But when I was there, I've traveled a lot of places. I had my dog with me and I was a solo female traveler there alone. I felt completely safe the entire time, whether I was walking around at night by myself in like more nightlife spots. I always felt completely secure. So I really do think this is a safe area. But with that being said, I always think that people should keep a good head on their shoulders when they're traveling, stay aware of their surroundings. And just because a country is safe doesn't mean that you should be careless. You should still be aware, be careful, keep your personal items close to the chest. And, things can still happen, but you could at least have the peace of mind of knowing that you're probably going to be fine if you're in Portugal.
Right. All great things to keep in mind. There's always those rare instances. But that's awesome. I didn't know that statistic that it was ranked so highly on the safety scale, I guess,
Yeah.
worldwide.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's really considered to be a safe place. I guess they just I mean, like, petty crime obviously exists even in safe places, but I just don't think it exists on like such a mass scale. And like violent crime, I think, is pretty limited there in general. Plus, it
Right.
doesn't have to deal with a lot of like natural disastery things. It's just like not in a part of the world that it's susceptible to that. So yeah, it's really safe.
Yeah, when I was there in 2019, there were 3 of us, so 3 21-year-old girls. We went out to the bars, to the clubs, we were out late at night, we walked everywhere, never had anything sketchy happen to us, and if anything, people were just, like, really looking it felt like people were looking out for us everywhere we went and just trying to, assist us through our trip and make it as seamless as possible, so that's awesome. Love to hear that about Portugal. So we're here at the end of our episode. To wrap up, Sky, what is the ultimate reason why people should travel to Portugal?
So I think a lot of people, when they're planning a European vacation, they immediately go, I'm going to France, I'm going to Spain, I'm going to Italy. But I think Portugal is going to provide something different than any of these places. First and foremost, it's really easy to get to for Americans. You will have a really easy flight. I think from New York, it was only around 6.5 hours. So that's a major pro in itself. It also can be very affordable for Americans. So, in a time when we're all trying to save a little bit of money but still experience the world, I think that Portugal is a great option because you can really enjoy yourself but not completely blow through your budget. I think another really special thing about Portugal is that it is just a very eclectic country. Any type of traveler can have fun here. Families can have fun with their kids, solo travelers can feel safe, and it's really easy to meet people. And it's also just a really romantic country, I think. So if you're in a couple and you're looking for somewhere to spend a honeymoon or just a trip together, I think Portugal is perfect for that. It's very easy to get around. So as a traveler, you don't really have to worry as much about how am I going to get from point A to point B. Like we talked about a little, because of its compact size, you can really see a lot of the country in a short amount of time. So I think that is another special layer. But really, it's just everything that you could want in a vacation, you are going to be able to find in Portugal, where you have beaches, we have history, there's gorgeous wine country, there's beautiful mountainous landscape. And the culture is just really, really special and welcoming. And I think that it's just a very beautiful place that everyone is going to really enjoy. And also the food. The food's amazing.
I'm sold. You did such an excellent job of talking about all of these wonderful things about the country and obviously, we could talk about it as long as we want to and it's never going to really do justice to all these amazing facets of Portugal. So, thank you so much. I really think that you inspired listeners. You definitely made me want to go back. So, this was so lovely today talking to you about it. Well, that's all for our show today. If you want to read all of Sky's Portugal guides, go to travellemming.com and type in Portugal in the search bar. She gives way more details on the best things to do, where to stay, how to get around, and more for many of the fantastic places that we discussed today. If you like this episode, I'll remind you to like and subscribe to our channel and give us that 5-star rating so you never miss an episode of the Travel Lemming podcast. Thank you again, Sky. You were such a wonderful Portugal expert, and I can't wait to visit again thanks to your inspiration.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a blast as usual. Loved coming on the Travel Lemming podcast again. And thanks.
Of course. And thank you, listeners, again for tuning in. We will see you next time on the Travel Lemming podcast.